Hello everybody, welcome, DJ Vic Vapor with you. Back with another Bitwig Studio advanced concept. And in this tutorial I want to focus on setting up some really good practices and audio effects for your return channels to bring things to life, specifically to bring your kick, your snare, and a nice little technique to bring your hi-hats to life. So let's take a few minutes here and kind of walk through some of the techniques that I'm discussing. So first what we want to do is, I'll show you real quick. I got a kick, a snare, and a hi-hat, and you can see on the channels down here there's no EQing. It's just the sampler and the samples. Let's take a listen. Nothing special, just samples to work with. So we're going to have the kick first, and I'm not going to work directly on the channel. I'm going to go over here. I've got two send channels set up for the tutorial. One's called Abbey Road Reverb, and the other one's called New York City Compression. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, there's hundreds of videos about New York City Compression. We're going to do it a little different. So let's take a look at that. That's where we're going to start. And we're going to add a compressor. I'm going to use all of Bitwig's internal stuff. You don't have to have fancy plugins for these techniques. If you have compressors you like, or certain plugins that we're using here that you want to use your own, these techniques still apply. I just want to show you it can be done with the built-in Bitwig equipment as well. So pay attention to where we're going with the settings, because it's real important, and they're usually the same for this technique. Ratio I'm going to push up to about 3:1. Right in there somewhere should be fine. The release, this is important, we want to have this guy pretty far open. I'm going to go up to about 500. The attack time, we're going to open up it quite a bit as well. Not quite as far, maybe around 5 milliseconds there. Somewhere there. Compression, we'll probably dial that in to taste here in a minute, but just the kind of starting point would probably be around 30 or so. So let's listen to our kick and then kind of dial into our compressor through our send here. And I'm going to mute the other guys so we can hear the kick by itself. All right, so obviously it gets a little bit louder, but I pulled the compression back to around 34, and you want to focus. I'm leaving the makeup on, but I'm still pushing the gain up about 2 or 3 dB here. So right in there sounds good for what we're going for. So right away you can hear the kick start to come alive and have a little bit more body and more depth and punchiness to it. So the next part of this technique is to add an EQ. So let's grab us an EQ5. And we don't need 2, 3, and 4. We just want it pole 5 and pole 1. And we're going to shelve those. So let's make this guy a low shelf. And let's bring it over to about 100. And we'll push it up about 2 or 3 dB. I'm going to go with 3. And we'll do the same on 5. We'll shelve it. We're going to bring it back to 10K, and then we'll push it up about 3 dB as well. It's going to bring back some life for that bottom end and that top end of our kick drum. So let's hear what we've got, and I'll A/B this for you as we go through it. Good, we're getting there. And that, typically for New York City style compression, I would put this on a return track, set it up just like I've showed you, and leave it and have it kind of there for you to dial things into. But it's going to work good with your bass and certainly with your kick, and it can help your snare out as well. So that's what we're going to do next, is we're going to dial in the snare and see how these two can sound together. So let's take care of that for us right now. And you can hear right away that snare really comes to life. I mean, it's getting all that punch and that big, you know, nice tight punch and power back to it. So the hi-hats, you don't really want to, when you're dealing with New York City compression, it's more for low-end elements like bass sounds and kick drums or punchy snares. It's not really designed to be part of, truthfully, the Real Technique was never really, in my understanding, never really designed to be part of the higher frequency. So we're not going to work on hi-hats in a New York City way. We're going to use the hi-hats on the, what I'm calling the Abbey Road Reverb. So let's take a look at that. And we'll go over here first, and we will add a reverb. And next we will add an EQ5. And we're going to leave those guys alone for a second, because what I want to do is work on the actual clip in the arrange here. Let me open up the clip. So this is our clip. Let me go ahead and solo it. And what you can do is select the clip down here, open up the inspector, go to velocity, because we want to, it's real stale. You know, it's just this digital stale sound. We want to bring some life to it and kind of humanize it a little bit. So the first thing we can do is go to this velocity here and kind of just barely dial in the chaos. You don't want to dial it too much. You know, you don't want these going too far apart because it'll be too obvious. You just want nice subtle moves there. So we move the spread and the mean and the chaos just a little bit. Let me get rid of that. You can kind of see now that they're up and down a little bit. So that's step one. Let's go back to our mix. Get rid of the inspector. And now let's take a look at our send channel where we've got these guys right here. So the reverb, I'm just going to leave the standard, the default setting, whatever came through. That's not terribly important. You can dial that to taste, but what's important, or the technique really calls for, what we do here on the EQ. So we don't need 4, 3, or 2. We just need 1 and 5 again. And I'm going to high pass 1 all the way up pretty aggressively to 600. And then 5, I'm going to low pass down to 10. And we can sharpen that up a little bit there and a little bit here on the Q. So that's the arc and the shape we want, 600 hertz and 10K. And let our reverb come through on that. So let's listen to it with it dialed in. Well, first without, and then listen to it as I dial it in. Of course, we don't want to go too far. We just want a nice subtle flavor, but it's really, really cool how like you're getting that reverb, but you're not getting like this big washed out reverb. You're just getting this nice, subtle, dynamic type reverb that'll play good. And this is a great technique for vocals as well, but I'm using on hi-hats today. And you can also hear the subtle movement we made with the velocity and chaos settings to kind of start to bring it to life a little bit. But we're not quite done yet. We can do just a little bit more here. So we're on return channel working with these guys, but let's go back to the actual channel for hi-hats. Here's our sample. Let's add an LFO. And then inside our effects on our LFO, let's get an EQ5. Okay, so again, we don't need some of these poles, so I'll take them off. We're just going to work on pole 3 right here around 1K. And we'll set up what my goal is with LFO1 is I want to make this movement right here happen. Just nice and subtle, up and down a few dB on both sides there. That's the goal we're going for. So I'm going to bring it down just about 2 dB, and then we'll hit LFO, and then we'll start working it up until we see a nice jump up. There we go. Somewhere in there looks good. So I'll come off the LFO, and then we can always dial this depth here. If we don't like what we're seeing, we can fine tune it a little bit. I'm going to bring this guy up a little bit. 1.5 should do. Now this is on quarter notes, so let's take it off and put it on timed seconds. And LFO2 is going to work the frequency. So now we've got the up and down, but we're going to take it and move it left to right as it goes up and down as well. And that's just a taste. You can kind of see that movement wobbling left and right and up and down all at the same time. We're going to bring this activity up a little bit more too. These don't have to be matched. They just wherever to taste, wherever it sounds good. So that's going to give us that nice mid-range kind of wobbly movement that's going to be subtle, and it's also going to complement the velocity that we adjusted earlier with the chaos settings. And we're also going to have our reverb dialed in so that our hat should now really come to life. This sample should sound more humanistic, like someone's actually playing it. So let's hear that in the mix. So you can hear that really strong kick, that really strong snare, and those nice subtle changes moving around throughout your hats. So there you have it, some really good techniques for you to take and put into your productions and use. These techniques here aren't simply, something you can use once or whatever. I would get in the habit of remembering them once you've practiced them a little bit and trying to find ways to apply them in most of your productions, especially this technique for hats. Phenomenal. And then you've got the great return channel techniques as well. Thanks for tuning in as always. Thanks for pushing play, and peace.